Hello friends, Stevie B here. Really quick video for you today. Somebody asked me recently how I go about writing riff rock tracks. These are basically cues that are written around a melodic guitar riff. These are tracks that are ideal for sync placements. I still hear them in advertisements quite often. It's been a minute since I've written one of these tracks, so I thought it would be cool to show you how I start these ideas off. I'll show you some of the sounds and the plugins and the virtual instruments that I use to write these kinds of tracks, and I'll also show you how I approach mixing and editing. So let's dive right in. So for these kinds of tracks, I almost always start with the drums. In this case, I wanted to put something together real quick, so I just started with this drum loop from Splice. And then I fleshed it out with these one-shots. So we got some stomps. These work great for rock tracks. I chopped up this other drum loop I found. A couple of claps here. And these sweeps here, which are subtle but really important, emphasizing every second snare. And yeah, basically just grouping all of that, running it through some compression. In this case, I'm using the Volv compressor. The next thing I'll do is map out the guitar idea using either a real guitar or sometimes I'll use a virtual guitar. So in this case, starting with the Sunburst Deluxe, this is my riff. You may have picked up there's a slight pitch bend on this note, which helps it sound a little bit more realistic. I'm panning this guitar slightly left. I'm also doubling this part with the Electric Vintage. I think the Electric Vintage library probably works better for like cleaner tones, like country, that kind of thing, or even like funk. But in this case, it's fleshing out this riff kind of nicely. I'll just solo it here. But together with the Sunburst, next item on the list is the bass. In this case, I'm using the Icon bass, which isn't necessarily like a go-to rock and roll sound for bass. But in this case, I thought it worked pretty well. Just solo this. Pretty gnarly tone, and I'm also putting that through a bit of Decapitator. Just give it a bit of extra edge. So guitars so far, all virtual. Which sounds pretty good, but it doesn't quite sound realistic enough for me. The approach that I really like is just combining virtual and real guitars. The virtual guitars in this case are going to provide a really nice foundation, but the real electrics is where the magic happens. So I've recorded 2 takes here using my Jazzmaster, and this is before I do any editing to them. They sound like this. So these 2 different takes here are panned further apart than the virtual guitars, and they're both pretty distinct tones. The guitar on the left here is also being played on a lower octave, and for the amp I'm using the Archetype Mateus Asato, totally dry, no reverb, no delay, a bit of compression and overdrive on its own. And you can hear it's pretty noisy too, but we'll take care of that. For the guitar on the right, I'm using a Guitar Rig patch. It's called Broken Heart Fuzz from Guitar Rig 6. I haven't updated to Guitar Rig 7 yet, I probably should. And this guitar tone is a nice complement to the Mateus Asato. It's like much fuzzier and creamier. Also really noisy. So as you can see, if we look in real close here, these 2 takes are pretty tight. But for the most part, they're both like a little bit behind the beat. And maybe you want to keep it sounding pretty loose. It's, you know, it's a subjective thing. If I'm writing for like a sync library or something like that, I'd probably keep the track pretty tight, but we don't necessarily have to quantize it to death. As far as editing the audio goes, quantizing audio is hit and miss. I found this to be the case in both Logic and Cubase. Sometimes it works really well. Other times you'll introduce some weird like digital artifacts into the audio which aren't that pleasant. Let's try it here and see what happens. So before I dive into that, just to let you know that the Riff Rock course is one of the many production courses that we host on Production Music Academy. It's a great short course that highlights the entire process of putting one of these tracks together, from the first idea to the finished master and everything in between. You can purchase the Riff Rock course as a standalone product. I'll link that below, or you can subscribe to the Production Music Academy and get access to over a dozen production courses, all of which are designed to get you up to speed on the most popular genres in licensing. So check out all those links below. Let's get back to the video. In Cubase, it's really easy to quantize audio to MIDI. So specifically, I could take this MIDI performance here and create a quantized template for it. So let's open up the quantize panel. Want to make sure audio warp is selected, and we can actually just drag this MIDI right in. We can also set the quantized strength. I might push that up a bit higher. Let's say 75%. Now, if we select this audio track and quantize it, we can see right away that this worked out pretty well. If we press quantize again, we'll get a bit closer, and that's still just a little bit behind, but it'll probably sound a whole lot better. Let's do the same thing for this audio. Just keeping an eye on these transients here. I press quantize. It's pretty locked in. Let's hear how this sounds. Just the guitars alone. So there might still be a few spots where I'm going to make some like tweaks here on this last note, for example. Another handy feature that we've got in Cubase here is a way to detect and strip silence. And that's going to come in handy here because there's two little sections in this riff where there's a very short break, and these patches are both really noisy, right? So we want to get rid of this noise floor completely. Now, in the case of this riff, there's only like two sections here. It wouldn't actually take that much time to go in and like make this edit. But let's say you're working with a lot of breaks in your riff. It might be faster to select the audio region, come to audio in the menu, advanced, detect silence. You kind of have to mess around with the threshold amount and the pre and post roll to get it right. In this case, the silence is very short. Let's try this out, see if it works. So there you go. It does the edit for you. Also draws in the fades, and you can fine tune all of that. I believe there's a very similar function to all of this in Logic as well. So trimming out the silence here on these guitar riffs sounds really good. Sounding pretty tight. Let's group these guitars. Maybe throw an EQ on this group. A critical mistake that a lot of people make when they're EQing electric guitars is excessive boosting of the high end. The sizzle, like the air in the electric guitars, doesn't always sound that great. It's kind of unpleasant to listen to. Electric guitars sound good in like the mid-range. I'll often dip out some of that high end, so I'm not accentuating the hiss. We also don't necessarily need a lot of the lows either. I want to make space for the bass to speak through the mix. I might do a slight dip around 200 hertz. And just a slight boost at around 1500. Let's add maybe just a bit of bus compression. Okay, let's see how this sounds all together. That sounds pretty darn good for putting an idea together real quick. Thanks so much for watching, guys. And by the way, let me know what you think of this latest studio setup. I've been rearranging this small little studio space here for a while now. It's been kind of driving me crazy, trying to figure out what works best. I've also invested in trying to level up the production quality of these videos just a little bit. I don't think I've quite figured it out just yet, especially with the lighting, but I did finally get a proper camera. I'm using my Sony camera for the first time here. The big change was moving my work desk to face the window. I wasn't sure about that at first, but to be honest with you, I've been really enjoying just the view behind the screen here while I work. But yeah, this is a pretty small space. I've been trying to figure out the best use of it, and these electronic drums behind me take up a lot of room. Anyway, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions about the track that I showed you, and be sure to check out productionmusicacademy.com. In the meantime, I will see you guys soon. Take care. Bye.